at Selman's in Tampa. Jimmy Giles, too. We talk about, Doug's incredible time there. 4 or 5 years, he took the team to the playoffs and had his chance. Now he works up in Washington, if I'm not mistaken, in the front office still, even after the change in ownership. Doug Williams and Leroy Salmon are Leroy's one of my best friends. And my coach coached him, Jimmy Johnson, when he was at Oklahoma. And Barry Switzer, who was on I think Barry was on last week, says he's the best football player he's ever coached. And that's saying a lot, them OU teams back in the day. Speaking of a guy who coached a guy like Aaron Donald and some of the greatest players of all time, won a Super Bowl, head coach. He's up with the Bears now in their broadcast team, and there's a lot going on in Chicago. And he's a guy that, yes, even tolerated me. My coach, my friend, Dave Wannstedt. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate you doing this.
Anytime, Danny. Just down here in Naples, Florida, kind of hanging on a little bit. Hopefully I'll see Jimmy next week. We're talking about getting together middle of next week over there in the Keys somewhere, having a cold one. And so we'll see, but it's good. Everything's good now. Yeah, as you said, getting ready for the draft. It's here. I'll be heading to Chicago in about a week, and a lot going on up there, as you mentioned in the pregame.
How about this, Coach? It's got to be rewarding to see Jimmy back with the fold of the Cowboys and all the things that you guys, what I was asked a question a couple days ago. What was that like being there with these guys? I said, you know what the first thing they had to do? They had to win the locker room over. And they had to win their formula over. These guys are showing college highlights on fundamentals on what they wanted us to look like as pros. And for the older guys, that's when I looked over at Crawford Kerr and I told people, I went, 90% of this roster won't be here next year, including my ass, because they're going to get guys in here that are going to buy in, and they're going to get guys in there that are going to believe. Coach, it's kind of where you are a little bit, especially if you're one of these organizations that are trying to build a roster. You got to figure out who's going to go along and play along.
Yeah, I think in today's game, what we did at Dallas, particularly coming from college, with no NFL experience, really. I mean, for the most part. So we're coming in there and we're putting in our playbook, our system. And the only way that would be successful, and I think that's why there's been so many college coaches fail, is because they go in and they try to put in their system with their mentality and their culture into a veteran locker room. And that's not going to fly. Where at Dallas, Jimmy had carte blanche on all the personnel, and the guys knew where the buck stopped. There was no GM or there was no owner back then or anybody else that was going to be involved with whether they made the team or they didn't. So, I remember our first mini camp. I had a confrontation with a player on the sidelines during a drill. And it was I think it was the first mini camp, second practice. He comes over and he started, and I said, we can't, that's not how we do it. I'm almost like, what do you guys know? So we went in my office afterwards, and about took 2 minutes, and Jimmy come walking in the office. He says, what do you think? I went, what do you think? He says, I'll handle it. He was gone. That was it. So, that's a very unique situation to get in. I mean, when you look around the NFL today, all these college coaches or all these coaches that are getting hired as head coaches, number one, a lot of them have never been a coordinator. I mean, they've never stood up in front of the room on any level. And now they're going to go in and try to install a new culture, and they're going to try to turn this thing around with players that have been in the league and are as old as they are in some cases. That's a tough assignment, with the owners being involved a lot more than they ever been, with the general managers being involved a lot more than they've ever been. That's a real tough blueprint to follow, in my opinion.
Coach, do you think today, if you were in the game as a D coordinator, you ran the 43, is today's passing offense more conducive to the 34 because of the cover people would you have to do with linebackers, running backs coming out of the backfield, because it's more of a passing game? Back when we were there, it was more of a third down defense where you were looking at the big back. If you were in the game, would you be more open to running that 34, or would you stick to that 43 still?
You know what, Dan? When I was coaching at the University of Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin became the head coach, and he kept Dick LeBeau as his defensive coordinator. And Dick and I got along real good, and I knew Mike. I was the head coach of the Dolphins when Mike was the secondary coach at Tampa Bay with Tony Dungy. We worked against those guys in the summer. So I was dying to get into this 3-4 defense just to learn it, really. I mean, we weren't going to change anything at Pitt, but I just wanted to learn because we're sharing the same facilities,
Yeah.
fields, all that stuff at Pittsburgh. So I sat down with Mike Tomlin one time because Mike was a 4-3 guy. The Tampa Bay Bucks, as you know, ran the same defense virtually that we ran in Dallas. Same philosophy. They were more of a cover one, a one deep. We were more of a two deep. Then they went to the Tampa 2. We went to quarters coverage. But the front was almost the same. Okay. With that being said, I remember saying it to Mike Tomlin, well, you're a 4-3 guy, and Dick LeBeau's running the 3-4. He says, Dave, it's not. Look what happens. James Harrison is an outside linebacker for us. And anytime we even think that it might be a pass, James Harrison's rushing the passer. He said, it's really, so to answer your question, the 4-3 defense, I think it's more relevant today than what it's ever been, because the only thing that's really changed, they're rushing 4 guys. Most teams are rushing 4 guys 80% of the time anyway, okay? So whether it's an outside linebacker or a defensive end, and I'll put up that argument all day long. Give me a guy that's standing up, and you're going to move him from side to side and try to trick people, and he's watching the ball. Is he coming? Is he not? As compared to a Charles Haley that's going to put his hand on the ground, or Jason Taylor or Richard Dent, guys that I've coached, and they're going to put their hand on the ground, and that's all they do all day. And what you did, Danny, and they're moving on the ball, and they're focusing on the offensive line, and they're working on their craft where they're lined up. I'll take that guy anytime as compared to trying to get, I think sometimes you can get too cute. That's just my belief, my philosophy. So to answer your question, no, and you see it sometimes. We did it. We did it at Dallas. I mean, there were times that I was dropping Leon Lett and Tony Casillas, our nose guard, or we would drop the defensive end and we would bring the nickel back. So we did some of that stuff, just as a little mix. But hey, when you got to get it, you want guys that are confident, know what they're going to do, and hopefully we got better players than they do, and we get after them, which we did with you and Jerome and Stubby, and it's the reason we were one of the, if not the best defense in college football down there in Miami.
Coach, let me go here with you. I think the familiarity that you guys had in college and in the pros was a direct result of the success that you guys had. And now Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia. And it seems, Coach, that he has autonomy on the type of personnel they move. Reddick, I think that was him. Reddick didn't like to be dropped in coverage. Well, they get Bryce Huff, who's more open to being dropped in coverage. That's going to be a Vic guy. How important for you was it to have familiarity with your position coaches? Because, Coach, if I remember right, there was a guy before you in 85. I think he went to Texas Tech or something, and then you came in from Southern Cal, but you had a relationship with almost every single coach on our coaching staff because of the past with you and Jimmy and Butch and with Coach Campo and all them guys. You knew all of them. So we were all like, oh, they know one another. But how important is that for you to pick your coaches, your assistant coaches on defense as a coordinator, or to have familiarity with how they're going to coach your guys?
Well, I think it saves so much time. It saves so much time in knowing how guys are going to present stuff, knowing what guys really believe in and what's strong. I mean, Butch and I were together for so many years,
Yeah.
so many different places that I never had a doubt. I knew exactly how Butch was going to coach you guys and what he liked during the game. And we communicated well on game day. Same thing with Campo going back, so the communication, I tell you, it can save a lot of time with really the biggest thing is making adjustments. And when you're putting a game plan together, you're not wasting time of having to go through something. Oh, let's try this. This could be really good, and where we would say, you know what, we've been there. We've done that. Let's not even waste time with that. Next, let's move on. So I think we could be a lot more efficient because we were together for so long. And I'm glad that Vic is doing that. It's
he's also added some extra OTAs also, Coach, so that because they're going to a different looking scheme on the 34, they were more in 5 front last year. So they want these guys to get a little bit more familiar. Now, is that more for the players or for the assistants to be able to, like you said, eliminate dead time?
I think both. Both. And I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of Vic's. If he's ever on the show or you're talking to him, you let him know that. I mean, he's not, his philosophy, and I've studied him going back to when he was at Harbaugh, San Francisco, and before that at India, all along. And when he was with the Bears, I was up at training camp with him during camp, and he's not going to give up a lot of big plays. He's not over the top on blitzing. The philosophy is I could relate to what he was doing. And, when they had their best teams in San Francisco, they were rushing 4, and they were getting same thing at the Bears. When the Bears
is he aggressive, Coach?
He's not going to talk much. But he is hard nosed and he's old school. And I think that's what happened in Miami. It was a great hire. I mean, Nick Sirianni, he needed to do something. And because I think he got exposed a little bit last year when he lost his 2 coordinators, and bringing in a guy like Vic with his experience, that was a good hire for Nick. It really was. I think it'll help him.
Coach, that I always say this because I think it's one of the greatest coaching staffs in the history of college and pro football because you guys had success at both levels. And they always ask me, what was it? I go, you always knew where you stood with these guys. We had so much talent. They didn't have to lie to you. They just went like this. No, you're next. Or, hey, I tell the story on Selwyn Brown. Selwyn Brown's sitting next to me. He got beat at a couple passes. He comes over, and Jimmy comes over to him and goes like this to him. Hey, anything we can do? And I'm sitting there, and I'm tying my shoes. He looks over, he goes, what the hell was that? I go, I don't know. And Jerome looks over at me too. I'm sitting there. Jimmy comes over again next game. Hey, let me know. I'm sitting there, and I go like this. I get up, I go, let me tell you something. Ain't going to be a third time. Those guys, homie, don't play that with them dudes. So you kind of always knew where you were with you guys. Let me get to some Bear talk, Coach. Is it Caleb?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I don't have any insight, but it sounds like it is. It sounds like, that he was in for his visit here. They had been out to California on a social visit. They were at his pro day. They spent a lot of time with him at the combine. So I think that they feel like they've done their homework. Ryan Poles, the GM there, I know they wanted a quarterback. Keep in mind, Ryan Poles was an assistant GM or pro guy at Kansas City when the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes. So his vision of a quarterback is not just a drop back guy, a Michael Penix, say, at Washington. It's a great passer. He wants a guy that can ad lib and can do some magical things. And that's what Caleb's done. Now, he didn't have a great year last year, but either did Drake May. And, that happens. The guy's got a lot of talent. The media here in Chicago can beat you up. The biggest thing that he's going to have to do is when he gets here, and this is what I really admired about Justin Fields. I remember seeing Justin Fields standing at that podium in December. It was probably wind chill at Soldier Field, about 15 degrees. He had a separated shoulder, and the media said, well, how's your shoulder going to be? Big game next week. And he says, I'll be ready. And he went out and played. I mean, you better be Chicago tough. And this isn't LA. This isn't Southern California, as you know, Dan. You better be smoking cigars and drinking red wine and eating steaks in this time. I mean, it's just the mentality of these people. We use the expression blue collar town. Well, Chicago is that, and they know their football and they appreciate it. And so he's going to have to be, there's nobody going to be babying him here. He's going to have to come in and toughen up. If he can do that, he's got all the skill, and they are building a supporting cast around him that's pretty darn good. Pretty good.
Okay, well, all I'll say is this. You better throw 35 touchdowns and $4,000 with pink fingernails in Chicago, because I'll tell you what, man, I'll say this. That'll become if he throws for $4,000 and he has 30 touchdowns and pink fingernails, that'll become a fad in Chicago. If he doesn't, they're going to go off on that guy, because that ain't a city. Because like you said, you freeze your baguettes off there in June. I mean, you got about 2 months. It's like Alaska, Northern Lights up there, man. I mean, hey, speaking of Justin Fields,
hey, Danny, I remember when I first became the head coach of the Bears, and we were playing our first really cold weather. It was going to be, the wind chill was, it was going to be in the teens, 10 degrees out or something, and that wind was blowing off the lake. And we're in there, and I'm looking for my long underwear and stuff, and coming from Dallas, and we're going out to warm up, and Richard Dent and Steve McMichael and these guys, all they're doing is putting Vaseline all on their arms, and they got no thermals on. Their sleeves are cut up to the top of their thing. And I grabbed Steve McMichael, and I said, Ming, I says, what are you guys going to – it's 10 degrees out there. He says, well, we just put this Vaseline on to make sure our skin just doesn't split on us out there, but we don't wear anything here in Chicago, Coach. And they went out there and they played that damn game. And and I tell you what, Tony Wise had his coat on, and he was taking his coat off. He was scared to death that Dent or somebody was going to roll, the fridge was going to come up to him and rip his coat off him.
Hey, all I remember, Coach, is that when we went up to like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and places like that, the Miami guys who'd never been north of the state line, and these guys are sitting here on, and I'm going like, man, it's going to be a tough game for the defense, and Coach is going to go nuts on us, man. They run on us, man. Holy cow, man. I never played with a bunch of guys in my life that always look and go, what's the temperature? And I'd always lie to them. Oh, it's 47. No, man, it's 37. We always had to worry about the weather, didn't we, Coach?
I was always nervous as long as the guys got off the bus, I said, we got a chance.
Hey, this is a cold one here. Coach, do you think they did enough for Justin Fields? They now bring in Keenan Allen. As you said, DJ Moore. They've really put a football team, and it looks like they'll probably do something there at 9 too. Either defensively with Turner or potentially maybe even Bowers. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did they do enough for Justin?
Yeah. I always look at quarterbacks this way. You're down by 10. There's 6 minutes to go in the game. Do you have a quarterback that can take you down the field twice when you have to throw it? They know you're going to throw it and score twice and win the game. That's what separates. I mean, could Justin Fields have got him to the playoffs this year? I think he could have. I mean, he got hurt. He missed 4 games last year.
So you think Pittsburgh got a good deal?
Well, no, listen to what I'm saying. His fourth quarter stats were terrible. He was last since he has been in the NFL. If you look up Justin Fields' fourth quarter statistics, and in the fourth quarter, Danny, he was last in completion, last in interceptions. He was at the bottom in almost everything. Wow. And I think there was one game in his whole career that he came back and and the Bears scored a field goal to win the game. So that's what was kind of missing. When you can play action him and you can boot him and waggle him and move him, and he can do a little bit of quarterback run or RPO, all that stuff, the guy's as good as anybody. But when you're behind and you got to throw the ball, that just never happened for him. And, Matt Eberflus, when he said that at the combine, because there was a lot of discussion after the season, were they going to keep him? Were they not? What were they going to do? Because there was a strong sentiment on the team and with fans to keep Justin Fields. And I know the coaches up there very well. This guy's in early and he stays late. He is tough and he will work his tail off. So, the intangibles are A+. So there was a lot of discussion back and forth. And Matt Eberflus at the combine made this statement. Well, you always need to be looking at quarterbacks and what they do in the fourth quarter. The minute he said that, everybody in Chicago was on that internet looking at fourth quarter statistics. And when they saw what I just told you about Justin, they knew that the Bears were moving on.
Two last questions for you, Coach. You mentioned Eberflus. Is he the right guy? And tell me why he's the right guy, because he's a defensive-minded guy. They're making all these offensive moves. I'm not saying defensive guys. I mean, look at Belichick and Carroll and Vrabel and all these guys. There's no question. I think the league is getting away from you guys being the head guy, and they're going more to these inexperienced analytical dudes, which I'm not a fan of. However, who is he, Coach? And is he the right guy in Chicago?
I'm a fan of Matt's, and I'll tell you why. Two things. One, I've been to their OTAs, I've been to their training camp practices, and it's about as close to a college practice tempo as you're going to see. There's nobody sitting on any helmets at the Bears. They are moving from drill to drill. He spent a lot of time coaching in college.
Huh.
And then I think when the guy took over the defense, they went from bottom 5 to 10 to top 10. And he completely won those defensive players over. And I think that part of him coming back this year, I think that ownership got him and said, listen, if we bring you back, where are we at on our defense? And I think he said, you bring me back, I'll hire a defense coordinator, but I will call the defenses again. And that's a big deal. He did a great job of it. He really did.
If you look at the draft, Coach, at 9, trade down, corner, edge, OT. What's the biggest need?
I don't know what edge is. I think somebody canceled defensive end. I still call him
defensive end.
I still call him defensive end. But no, in all seriousness, I would go. They need another pass rusher for sure. And the best pass rusher, and I've watched all these guys, the best one in the draft, I think, is Latu, the guy from UCLA. This guy's a player, but he's got the medical rep because he failed his physical at Washington. And so he leaves Washington and goes to UCLA, and they pass him. So that's I don't know anything about that. But I think I'm a big fan of his. And you know who else I like? The kid out of Florida State, Verse. Because this guy plays the run and the pass. Dallas Turner, I evaluate him. He's a great athlete. He can run like mad. He can bend. He can do those things. Watch him using his hands, taking on the run. Will Anderson. It's not happening. He's got to be out there in space. So if you want a guy that's going to line up on the edge of a tackle and take on a block, I would go with Latu or I would go with Verse if on defense. And receiver-wise, with Keenan Allen, they got Allen, they got DJ Moore, they got 2 or 3 young guys. Could they use another receiver? Sure, they could. There's some great ones there. Could they use another offensive lineman? Sure, they could. But I would look, if I was the Bears, I would do everything I could. If they like these 2 guys that I talked about, I would take one of them.
Coach, finally here, let me say this to you. Someone asked me about the draft, and, I put the draft guys down too. I'm like you. I like watching and looking at. I always thought you guys were the greatest talent evaluators of all time because you could look at a guy and you could see all these great players, no matter if they're 1-star, 2-star, Cortez Kennedy, Russell Maryland, no star. You guys knew what you were looking at. And someone goes, Why were they so good? I go, well, let me just say this to you. Those guys were so good at talent evaluating. You couldn't have any one of us put our game film on. You could have went to our practices because Barry Switzer, he was on last week, and Barry goes, you know what made you guys so good? I showed up at a practice. I couldn't believe what I was watching. I thought I was watching an everyday football game on a Saturday. You guys were playing football on a Tuesday, Saturday games on Tuesdays. I said this to Coach. You could have drafted the first rounds, and everyone would have probably went in their respected places if you just went off our practices. That's how intense they were. You could have drafted, couldn't you, Coach? Off our practices alone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And then I laugh. Jimmy and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We get done with practice, and you guys barely had a time for a shower. And we met up in that room. The training table was already closed. We says, go through there quick, and you throw some slop on in a styrofoam container, and we'd come down the hall with the defense, and you guys would be in that little room just packed in there. It was 100 degrees, sweating, eating out of a plastic container with a plastic fork, and we were watching ball film, getting ready. I mean, it was things have changed.
It was a magical, Coach. What a magical time! I mean,
wow,
that my defensive front four. Hawkins, first rounder. Stubby would have been a first rounder. I think he was the 30th pick. Jerome was the 9th. I was the 56th player taken as a junior. We had Kennedy and Maryland, all these guys behind us. I mean, our front seven were so insane. And like you said, it was the practicing. It was the coaching. I've never been involved in anything that was a perfect storm like that. And you know what, Coach, I say about you guys? I don't ever remember you guys ever being like this. You never were off the reservation. You demanded perfection, but it was always coaching. And I don't ever remember negative words like, you freaking, never that. It was always, get your ass, we started out with pursuit drill, 30 minutes of it. But you know what? I tell people this, I go, you know why? We're watching the Eagles, and the Eagles, and Ray Lewis is going like this. The Eagles have horrific pursuit angles, and he went like this. We'd be running for 3 hours at Miami because we started that. You and Butch and them would go, first 35 minutes of practice would be pursuit. And here's you throwing the ball. We'd have to run to it. That's before practice even started. We would do that. That was the first drill. And that drill always stuck out in my mind on how you guys always looked at the little things. Crazy how that happened.
Well, we knew how much talent that you guys had. And, you know, we just had it started with Jimmy. We just were going to try to do everything we could to get the most out of that talent, you know, and not let the moment get past us, I guess you could say. Take advantage of it.
It was really wonderful.
we were young and loved what we were doing and silly and crazy, you know, and it was fun.
Man, it was totally fun, man. I'll never in mind. And by the way, one more, Coach, you guys have been the same, and I say this to Jimmy and Butch and Campo, you guys have been the same to me since I was 19 years old that I am right now at 60. Same.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You guys really believed in what you said, and you're the same people.
Well, I'm going to see Jimmy next week, okay? And then during the draft, Tony Wise called. He's driving somewhere. He says, you're going to be in Chicago. I said, yeah. He says, how about I'm going to stop in for about 3 or 4 days during the draft. So we'll catch a couple steak places. And so, I mean, yeah, so nothing's changed. We're still doing the same things.
I love Coach Wise. You make sure I said hi to him. Make sure you tell him hi.
Well,
that's really great guys. Coach, thank you.
All right, Danny. Good talking, buddy.
You bet. Dave Wannstedt. I love Coach, man. He ran one of the absolutely best defenses in college football and in the National Football League, and it was just absolute fun to play for him, man. It really was. And every year I was at UM, we were the number 1 ranked defense in the country. And those football teams did not like giving up touchdowns, first downs, long runs. So when I'm a little bit, hey, Yale, maybe this is why I'm a dick to the Eagles, that they don't take that side. I take that side personally. Okay? I take that side personally. I take getting running over personal. I take 140 40 yards rushing, personal. You're not doing that to me. That's not happening. It's just, I'll kick you in the nuts before that happens. That's not, I'll hit you with a chair in the head before you're going to run 140 yards on me. That's just not going to happen. I mean, we had that mentality. It's not going to happen. Nobody was going to do that. Scoring on us. I don't care what the score was. We're up 40-0. We're sitting there going, I want the goose egg. I want the goose egg. I want the goose egg. Everyone's like, we're up 40-0. I'm not letting up on nothing. Get your ass out of here. Oh my God, me and Jerome threw many people out of the huddle. Hey, dude, we're not having that. You're not taking. I'm not coming out. We're good. I used to throw my helmet, man. It was horrible. I was terrible. My aunt will tell you, I was terrible with that. Okay. And T. Will goes, you're such a dirty player. Oh, I know. So horrible. Big bad Sills. Oh, I know. Sills, were you a dirty player? Oh, I don't know. Would I step on offensive linemen's hands? Oh, I don't know. Oh, I know you're kidding. Well, foot on neck kind of guy. That's it. Absolutely, man. And that's the one thing your defense doesn't have. You know what they don't have? A set of baguettes to kill people. Step on their throats. Turn them into roadkill. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. Roadkill. Instead, you were the roadkill. You were you know what roadkill is? AKA LJ. Roadkill. Or